Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's edition of Resistance TV. I'm delighted to welcome Tracey Mallaghan and Steve Gower onto the programme this evening to talk about Insulate Britain's campaign against fuel poverty. Every year, thousands of people die in this country from conditions caused by living in cold homes. This is tantamount to an annual cull of working class people. Friedrich Engels coined a term for this in his seminal book, The Condition of the Working Class in England. He wrote, "The class which at present holds social and political control places proletarians in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and an unnatural death." He described this as social murder. Who'd have thought that 176 years after Engels' book was published, social murder would still be around and actually be on the increase? I've been campaigning against fuel poverty for around 40 years and getting precisely nowhere. And at the turn of this century, the new Labour government set a target to end fuel poverty for vulnerable households by 2010 and to eradicate fuel poverty for everyone by the end of 2016. But tragically, they failed miserably on both counts. In 2013, when I was still an MP, I moved a series of amendments to the energy bill to commit the government to eradicating fuel poverty by 2020. But my amendments were not only rejected by the Tories, the Labour leadership opposed them too. But look, talk is cheap, and the reason New Labour failed to meet its targets was because it failed to address the root cause of these preventable deaths. And that root cause is corporate capitalism. The Parliamentary Labour Party is enthralled to corporate capitalists. That's why they took no meaningful steps to achieve the targets they set themselves 21 years ago. That's why my amendments were opposed by the Labour leadership in 2013. And that's why the Corbyn project was ruthlessly sabotaged by so-called Labour MPs. Meanwhile, working class people are losing their lives because they can't afford to heat their homes adequately. This refusal to invest in suitable insulation and the failure to nationalise the energy utilities is also contributing to the climate crisis. That's why the Resist movement's core policy platforms includes a commitment to reverse all privatisations of public services, including the utilities, and to insulate all residential and commercial premises to reduce the carbon footprint and end fuel poverty. The consistent failure of the political class to deal with this endless emergency is why Insulate Britain activists are now trying to force the issue, and they're risking their liberty to do so. But before I bring in our guests, I just want to play this short video where Insulate Britain urged the government to take this issue seriously.
Dear Prime Minister Johnson and the British Conservative Party, we are writing to you about a matter of utmost urgency, the climate emergency. We are citizens with no agenda other than to ensure the survival of our children, our neighbourhoods and our country in this time of unprecedented crisis. Oh my God! As Sir David King recently stated, we have to act quickly. The next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity.
Prime Minister, it is your responsibility and your legal duty to act in the best interest of the British people. Investing in insulation of our housing stock produces the greatest reduction in emissions compared with any other option.
Insulate Britain has a simple and achievable demand to insulate all the housing stock in Britain now.
It will create tens of thousands of jobs which we can be proud of. It will prevent thousands of deaths and help the millions currently living in fuel poverty who have to decide between heat or food.
We believe Conservatives all over the country would be prepared to make tough decisions now if it prevented catastrophe tomorrow. It's time to get on with the job. And if there is no substantial response to these demands by the 1st of September, we will make further announcements about what actions we will next be forced to take.
let me bring in Tracey first of all. Tracey, you've certainly made an impact since that video was recorded and posted online. And I know that you've been on national TV, and certainly the campaign has attracted a lot of attention. And I'm reminded, to be honest with you, of campaigns like the suffragettes. I mean, they were very controversial at the time, and I'm sure a lot of people were telling them, oh, look, you know, don't engage in these sorts of direct action tactics. You know, just be reasonable, just be polite and diplomatic, and you know, we'll listen to you and we'll make progress. But as I said in my introduction, I personally been campaigning against fuel poverty. I was a member of Parliament and council leader, and made very little impact. Obviously, the frustration's boiling over now with yourselves, and a lot of other people are becoming increasingly aware of the challenges, not just with fuel poverty, but obviously the clear implication of or the consequences of you know, not dealing with this problem and the climate crisis. So, just tell us about the genesis really of Insulate Britain to begin with, and what your next steps are likely to be, because I know a number of activists have already been sentenced to prison terms, and others are in court in the next few days and are potentially facing prison terms themselves. So just tell us, as I say, a little bit about the genesis of Insulate Britain, and then tell us about what your next plans are.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. It's a real honour to be here tonight, and nice to be talking to somebody who doesn't want to make out that I'm a terrorist because I started caring about this stuff, you know. So yeah. This is all very new for me. I'd never really followed politics. It felt that something that was other, you know. To me, it was October 19. I heard that there were protesters in London and that they were saying an emergency had been declared and Parliament should act like it. And I honestly thought, what emergency? What is this climate crisis, you know? And I was just horrified to realise that my Parliament can declare an emergency for 5 months. I hear nothing. Most of my friends and family know nothing. And then the dawning realisation that if I was still working, if I hadn't have got ill and lost my job, I wouldn't have had time to read science reports, watch select committees, you know, look at what's going on in the Houses of Parliament. Because I think you said, you know, a contract's been broken, social murder. And that's what it is, right? Because we vote them in and then trust that if there was going to be a problem, that they would let us know, because, you know, we want to work together. Most people, you know, as we saw with coronavirus, are happy to protect each other. It's the Westminster bubble that can't believe that. So it's been a real short but interesting journey. I mean, what a couple of years, right? I woke up to politics and paying attention, and we had an election. You know, I'd voted before, but I'd never really invested. I'd never been canvassing, and I was heartbroken. You know, when Corbyn didn't get in, because suddenly everything that they're saying is making sense to me. You know, I'd always thought of the economy a bit like gravity. You can't change it, but it bloody hurts if you fall. And that's all a load of lies, isn't it, Chris? So yeah, for me, it's been intense, and just, you know, because I'm not working, because I'm at home, you know, and I'm very grateful that I live in Britain. I do understand being poorly in any other country, I wouldn't be as well looked after as I am here, but we've still got a way to go. But realising that this truth is being withheld because the truth is ugly and MPs are more concerned about popularity is, it's a great crime to me, what is going on. So when I heard about Insulate Britain, it felt the only responsible thing to do was to demand that we stop the madness.
No, indeed. So what's the next steps then, Tracey? I mean, obviously some of your activists have already been sent to prison, others are potentially facing a jail term. I mean, is this going to deter Insulate Britain? Will you be embarking on different tactics? I mean, what's the next plans? What's the next steps?
To never give up. From the beginning, we've been steadfast. You know, we thought the campaign might run 2 or 3 weeks before they locked us all up, because, you know, despite this injunction, there were laws that they could have stopped us with. You know, we weren't even getting bail conditions. It was quite surreal. So, of course, we'll continue. You know, every week we were just talking together. Are we going to continue? Yeah, we're going to continue. So it's been so humbling watching people like Steve, you know, who's never been arrested before, going again and again and again. So we will continue. You know, they're taking us in batches of 9 into court. So, yeah, we can stop.
Tell us a little bit about this injunction, if you can, Trace, because I suspect that a lot of people won't be fully across what has actually happened. I mean, obviously, you posted that video, you then started taking the direct action, then this injunction was served on you. Just tell me a bit about that, and who is this injunction against? Is it named individuals or the organisation or what?
It's against anybody and everybody. No, it's they're not naming individuals, although some of us have been named. 32 are definitely named to now. The injunction stands against anybody from any campaign group doing anything. It's quite terrifying. And it's also, it really makes me angry. Yet another example that our government are prepared to change laws through the back door to suit themselves, right? We are not being sent to prison for sitting on the road. We are not being given the chance to be judged by, a jury of our peers, which is, that's quite a fundamental rock of our justice system as far as I'm concerned. They're going through the back door. We're being locked up for contempt of court. So for daring to continue to protest, I find it quite scary myself that they're prepared to go to these lengths to remove justice and people understanding what's going on is the way I view their moves at the moment. So it's real lack of character on Priti Patel's part. Right.
And who took the injunction? Was it the Highways Agency or who was?
Yeah, it's the Highways, or they keep changing the name. I think it's called the Highways Agency.
Or
we've been confused by the name, but yeah, it's the roads of England or whoever cares for them. And, we've had interesting debates. Well, don't roads belong to the public or do they belong to the Queen? So it's a brand new thing that's happening. They've never taken protesters to prison through breaking injunctions before in the UK. This is all new territory for all of us.
Yeah. Let me bring in Steve then, if I can now. Steve, I mean, one of the criticisms which is levelled against Insulate Britain activists is that apparently you're all middle class, you're all wealthy, and most of you are retired. So can you just tell us about your background and about the other activists that are involved in Insulate Britain to confirm or deny whether you're all wealthy, retired, and so just tell us a bit about that.
Well, thank you, Chris, for giving me this time to be able to speak on behalf of myself and the people that have been on this campaign. Middle class? Well, no, I'm personally not middle class. I've been working class all my life up until the time about 5 or 6 years ago where I found myself homeless due to a relationship breakdown, which can happen to anybody, anytime, any day. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Ever since then, I've been voluntary advocating for the injustices that I saw whilst I was in temporary accommodation in my town where I live in Gloucestershire, and basically representing and giving people a voice that are on the street that may not and have not and don't even realise that they have got rights. That's been an amazing journey, and whilst I've been advocating, I've always also been campaigning on their behalf. But also with I joined Unite Communities in my area, so I've been on marches for various industrial disputes, including Honda, for one, NHS, universal credit cuts, the lot, Black Lives Matter, numerous Free Palestine, a lot of.
Would you say, Steve, that you're typical of Insulate Britain activists? I mean, how many wealthy, middle class, retired activists have you got?
You'd have to ask them. All I can say is that some of us are over the age of 50 plus. But what I've noticed in this campaign is the fact that these individuals have got a lot, regardless of what their experiences regarding homelessness and poverty, they're willing to step in line and take control of a protest movement. And we got loads of different varieties of people like myself who are unemployed, people who are disabled, people who have retired, young individuals, I mean the under 25s, individuals from a vast background of society. And I got to be honest, Chris, before I went into this campaign because of the food and fuel poverty that I could see. And what I've learned regarding the environment sat around a table with individuals and have a decent discussion about the injustices and inequalities and whatever happens with regarding to the people and the planet. It's opened my eyes enormously, and it's such a unique position we're in as a group of individuals that combined together we can well, the movement can make a difference and speak for them fellow-minded people as well. It's an incredible experience I've had since this.
I mean, how many activists or members of Insulate Britain are there now? I mean, is it growing as an organisation?
I believe so. I think we started with around about 130.
Right.
To put it into context, perhaps even more, but put it into context, after the unfortunate incarceration of the last 9 campaigners, we had over 120 arrests on Lambeth and Vauxhall Bridge, and they were new. The majority of them were new people, as in getting arrested for the very first time, as was myself before I started this campaign. I think it's hitting a nerve. It's hitting a nerve where people are actually, well, I hope it is, that people who haven't had a voice in the past have now, with the actions that we're taking. We're listening. We know what you're going through, the pain, especially when I'm talking about the poverty side of it, and giving an inner strength to them people that may not realise about the climate, they're a voice as well. You know, those that are not quite sure what about the climate that's going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
No, indeed. I mean, you said you're a member of Unite Community, Steve. I mean, have you had any interest, support, or hostility from fellow trade unionists?
On the grassroots, I got to be honest, no, I haven't. People that I know through Unite Community, I'm trying to get the branches to actually acknowledge the fact that a bit of solidarity. I got to be honest, it's a bit of a struggle, but that might be just because of in the context of where I am at the moment. To put it mildly, I would love more unity between not just Unite, but all trade union movement, and the civil movement as well, because this will affect everybody, regardless of working class, sex, gender,
No, indeed.
race, whatever.
I mean, Tracey, I mean, some of the criticisms which I've seen of Insulate Britain, they're saying, oh, you know, this is affecting working class people, disrupting their ability to get to work and so on. I mean, how do you respond to some of this? I mean, these are criticisms which are coming from people who say they're on the left, people who, you know, fellow socialists who are, you know, general concerned about the environment, concerned about you know, the social conditions of people, but you know, some people seem to be repeating the you know, the attack lines which we're seeing in the corporate press. So I just wondered how you would respond to that when people level that criticism at Insulate Britain.
Yeah, we all hate doing it. None of us, you know, we're doing this, sorry, because we care. So we hate it. But tell us another way to get on the media like we managed to do for 6 weeks, please. You know, that's not a flip response. You know, genuinely, we've all thought, I've only been an activist, if you want to call it that, for a couple of years, but there are hundreds of years combined in the campaign of people who've, you know, been going since Greenham Common days. I've met wonderful women. It feels to me the only way to break the deadlock on the truth that the media and the government have is by disrupting enough normal people, that the media has no option but to give us airtime or show themselves, you know, how very choosy they are with what they share on the media. So we hate doing it, but the truth is ugly. You know, this isn't about being popular. I think we're in this mess to some extent. It's multi-layered, isn't it? But part of it is people want to be popular, MPs want to be popular. You know, journalists maybe want to be popular, people like this maybe. And we've got to stop that. You know, the truth is ugly. People can't do what is needed unless we tell the ugly truth. So, yeah, we're really sorry. But I hope when you got home, you know, you had some space to think, I'm in a nice, cosy home. I haven't got to make the choice between heating or eating, and we really have to get our emissions down.
Yeah, I mean, and just in terms of the rationale for what you're doing, I know I've seen you valiantly fighting against the hostile questions from Richard Madeley, where it almost kind of came to that, it seemed, where they're not really. I mean, they basically are just sort of playing the playing the person, really. These ad hominem attacks that we see, and I know you were frustrated, and they were trying to get them to talk about, well, what is it underneath? What is it driving people? Law-abiding citizens. What is it driving people? They've never been in trouble with the law, many people, or arrested, or anything like that in the past. To take the very bold, direct action that you are doing now, and you got some of those points over, I thought, despite his unwillingness to allow you to make those points clear. So obviously this is an opportunity now, Tracey, perhaps, just kind of set out what is it that's driving, and what are the potential consequences if we don't get a grip of the climate crisis, which I think, far too many people are kind of sleepwalking, it seems to me, to potential catastrophe. And it's really important, I think, that we wake people up. You're doing a great job, I think, of raising people's consciousness in that sense, because, okay, people might be pissed off that they're having their journeys disrupted and so on, but hopefully it's making people look in a little bit more detail now about what is it that's driving you to actually take this sort of action. I mean, and hopefully then, people will start to see the real potential existential crisis that is afflicting humanity. I mean, it's not too strong to put it like, in my opinion. But anyway, just set that out, if you could, Tracey. Just unpack it a bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So what drives me is, like I said, the understanding that if I hadn't have lost my job, I probably wouldn't know most of what I know now. It makes me desperate, right? I should have known this stuff. We all should know this stuff. And then the second part, why? Why haven't the government and media been honest with us? The first council meeting I ever went to, one of them MPs said, you can't tell people the truth unless you make it happy, so people will get depressed and do nothing. And I got angry and stood up and said, we'll start coming to your meetings. And I walked out. And I spent, especially since being in like this media circuit, so surreal. I never wanted any of this. I want to go back to crocheting and baking. But yeah, what is it? What's the grip? And I can only think it's greed. People have sold out, just like the tobacco companies did. The fossil fuel companies wanted to delay. I keep making myself believe the best in people, Chris. I'm determined. Love and rage is what XR says. So they're scared. I think it's fear. They know that they've sold out to these lines. They know they're lying to each other. I think there's an element of fear. I don't think that councillor cared if people got depressed. I think maybe he was a bit worried. But more people like me would be going, hang on, you've done what now? So yeah, it's hard. And what I found really difficult since paying attention to this stuff is I get hit a lot with, but we have democracy, Tracy. Why don't you just vote? Have you watched the people in the House of Commons is what I want to say. There's no debate. Like, there's no talk going on in our world at the moment. It's arguing, and it's like people have to win or lose. And what we have at the moment is a crisis that means we get a bit creative. I think some of that we train creativity out of ourselves and our children. We work in education, but that's maybe wandering a little bit off track. But yeah, what stops us from telling us the truth? It's the lobbyists have such power. There's huge greed, and I think we fear each other more than we should. So my faith in people has actually grown doing this campaign quite an awful lot. I get an awful lot of hate, but despite some of the media whipping people up to be violent on the street, we haven't really seen it. There's been some difficult to watch instances, but people aren't like that. If we all agree that it's a case of, isn't it? Sorry, we got some things really wrong. This out of control capitalism is a really bad idea. Giving the banks free rein, it's a really bad idea. To me, I look around and I think all this stuff is proven to not be working. So why are we more scared of change and having a go? Heartbreaking.
No, indeed. But I mean, you were talking, weren't you, about the implications of a 2-degree temperature rise, average temperature rise, and what that would mean for people in this country and around the world. Just say a little bit more about that.
So the physical reality of where we're at now, 2 degrees, when I first heard it, I thought, what's the big deal? I don't like being cold. A degree sounds like nothing, does it? But what we don't fully accept is that human beings, all life, we can only live within a certain range of all sorts of different environmental conditions, heat being one of them. And 98% of scientists agree, and the Chatham House report said we've got a 95% chance of hitting 2 degrees. And as we go into 2 and 3 degrees, drought will increase. And we've seen how the business world responds to that. They've put water on the stock market. You know, we're going to face famine, rice crops, wheat crops are going to fail. So we're going to face famine, drought, with the water, drought and famine, and 1 billion people on the move, because people are resilient, right? If parts of the world become uninhabitable because of war, famine, or drought, people will move. And if we continue with this horrible way of handling it, like, sorry, the potluck of your birth makes you born on the wrong side, we don't care, we're not sharing. We're going to have war, right? And we're going to be greedy and not share. So it maybe sounds a bit childish, but we need to get a bit better at sharing, because the physical reality is if we don't get the heat down, the luxuries are going to be food and water, not do I need a new iPhone? You know, it's
no, indeed. Well, I mean, again, in our sort of core policy agenda, I mean, we've talked about the importance of a proper Green New Deal, and that means, you know, not just, I mean, adaptation, yes, but there's only so high you can build defence floods, you know, walls to defend against flooding and so on. And so, you know, we've talked there needs to be a radical rethink of the agricultural practices. There needs to be a reforesting, I think, of our uplands, and we need to be using Britain's influence in the world to encourage these sorts of measures to be taken elsewhere. Ironically, China, which gets a lot of stick, is actually doing a lot in terms of renewable energy, but is also engaged in a massive reforestation program. 23% of China's land mass is now forest, and they have a target to reach 30% by 2030. Now, if the United States and all these other Western countries that like to criticize China, and there's a lot wrong with China, I'm not saying China's perfect, far from it, but you know, it is doing a lot right, and you know, we get a very unbalanced discussion about this. The commentary is very partial. A bit like, frankly, the sort of coverage that you get. We hear this, you know, about China, and they're kind of moving towards, well, they seem to be building up towards a war with China. It's absolutely ridiculous, the state of affairs. But I just want to bring Steve in back again, if I can, and just to sort of say for anybody who's watching, if you've got any questions, I don't think we've got Sean with us this evening. So she normally scrutinises Sean or Lizzie, any questions that comes in, and then puts them to the panel. So if you've got any questions, if you post them in the chat, and then Gaz will put them up on screen, and I'll ask Steve and Tracey if they could respond to them. But let me just bring Steve back in. Steve, I mean, one of the things, obviously, is, on occasions, it's looked, you know, pretty hairy. Some of the, as it were, confrontations between yourselves when you block the roads, and you know, some motorists have got, you know, quite aggressive, and I think one protester was almost run over, but not quite. I just wonder how you've dealt with that kind of aggression, and what's been the response from motorists. I mean, and have you been able to engage people in a rational dialogue?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The initial start of the campaign was a bit difficult because the public didn't realise exactly what it was about, and that was probably the hardest block that I was involved with. From that time, I've got a hand on heart say that as it progressed, at one stage, and I can only say that as an individual who was on one block, there was dead silence. I couldn't get over it. The fact that people were sat in their cars, and we explained to them as soon as the police would arrive that we would, it would all be clear, and there was nothing I had to say. I handed out a few leaflets and what have you, and yet on the media on the same day, all they took was another block that had been contacted where they were pulling people off. I can't remember now. And I thought, hang on a sec, this wasn't a block that they were reporting that we were on. And I think the message got through. there's obviously the people that were upset, but nothing to the extent of, personally, I can say, on up until what the first block was. And I take my hat off to them people, because we are there giving a voice to don't forget, when we started this campaign, there was 8,500 stated to be dying in their homes. That was in September, and by the time we finished, the figures come out for the following year of 63,000 individuals dying in their home. And you can't
from cold related cold houses, conditions related to living in cold homes,
from dying in their homes. That's what I'm
in field poverty.
Yeah, in field. Okay, that's what I'm understanding. There was some figures I guess for COVID, but then you've got to ask, you're talking a huge issue with houses. They think, oh, houses this, houses that, but you're talking of social care and God knows what. Why would individuals die in their own home? Okay, some may well be ill and want to pass away. I get that, yeah, but not 63,000. No. Why weren't they in hospitals? Why, if they did die of COVID, I mean, why weren't they in hospitals? Why weren't they getting the care that they deserved or possibly want? Or why were they left alone? There's so many questions, it beggars belief, but 63,000 individuals passed away in the winter of 2020, compared to 8,500 acknowledged the year before. And it's going to get worse, Chris. We know that. I'm living in fuel poverty myself. I'm living in a private rental flat where I am sat here now, and it's freezing. All right, I got to have the heating on. I got the choice of heating or eating, like 7 million others. Okay, it can't go on no more. We've had protests, we've had petitions, we've had everything. I've been my MP. All right, I've done all that, got all the T-shirts, and it doesn't work. And
well, the situation's getting worse, isn't it, Steve? I mean, that's the point. I mean, we are an incredibly wealthy country, the fifth biggest economy, and
the
situation.
Can I just say this? I'm living in fuel poverty because I'm on universal credit. They've stopped the £20 reduced the money by £20 a year when they should have increased it by another £20.
Yeah.
All right. I've been sanctioned because I had an opportunity to go to my job centre to be told how much I'd be better off with £20 less in my back pocket, or to sit on the M25 and say this isn't right. And I got sanctioned for that. All right. The God willing, I will probably end up in jail this time next week. All right. But at least I'll be fed and have a roof over my head. This is 2021. And a middle-aged man at retirement age has got that to look forward to. I've worked all my life. All right.
Yeah.
I just want to say to you, or to the others possibly watching this, I am the ghost of Christmas future. And if nothing changes, you'll be sat in this flat and you'll be having the same sort of injustices that I'm seeing every single day. I don't want to pass that on to my son. All right. And I dare say nobody else wants to pass it on to their children. There's nothing here to fall back on. Act now before it's too late.
That's a very powerful point, Steve, and I can echo that. I think a lot of people perhaps don't realise the precarious nature of life in Britain today, and I saw this on a regular basis when I was doing my MP surgeries, and I would get constituents coming to see me who'd lost their job, who'd been fortunate to be in work all their lives in relatively well-paid occupations, people working in places like Rolls-Royce, which is, well-paid, relatively well-paid anyway, occupation. And, Derby's fortunate, it's got a number of high-tech industries and so on, and it's diminished in terms of the number of people that work in those sorts of occupations, it has to be said. I mean, when I left school in Derby in 1972, I think there was around 120,000 people in manufacturing. It wasn't perfect, but, you could look forward to a secure future, reasonable standard of living. You could either get a council house, or if you wanted to, you'd have the money as a working class individual to be able to buy your own home. But very often, well, invariably, actually, people would say they couldn't believe how parsimonious the social security system was in this country. A lot of people thought, oh, you know, people are living the life of Riley on benefits, but of course we know that that is completely untrue. And so I think that that's a really powerful point that you make, that you know that people could find themselves in a situation that, you know, that you've just outlined there. And that's why I think it's important that we need to stand. I mean, we keep going on about this in the resist movement. You know, we have to work together. We have to stand together in solidarity. We've got more in common with each other as working class people than we have with those at the top of society, the people, you know, running the corporations, the people pulling the strings, as it were. And I always used to say to people when I was campaigning on the doorstep, if I came across someone who would complain about asylum seekers or immigrants or whatever, that I would always make the point, you have more in common with the asylum seekers, you have more in common with migrants than you have with those captains of industry, because people are very often fleeing the wars and the exploitation that those corporations are responsible for. And so, you know, whilst we also have lots that unites us in this country, there is lots that unites us worldwide. And you know, as Marx talked about, you know, workers of the world unite. There's never been a more apposite time, it seems to me, for us to do that and to make that case. And we have to make the point that, you know, that collective response is so crucial. And what we've seen over the last 40 years, of course, is this kind of individualization. I mean, Thatcher made the point, there's no such thing as family. No such thing as society, beg your pardon, only individuals and families. And that's you know, it's a very negative way of looking at it. But of course, it suits the interests of the corporate elites. If we kind of internalize and individualize kind of any misfortune that might befall us, internalize as if it's our fault, we've done something wrong, rather than actually it being a feature of the system. You, I think, making that point, Steve, of going along with protesting is very pertinent to actually, you know, highlight why we're in this situation. Let's do something about it. We shouldn't be in a situation where we are, you know, people are struggling in the way in which you've outlined. But Tracey, I mean, obviously a number of your colleagues have been sent to jail. Just remind us how long a jail term they've got, and can you also tell us a little bit as well about one of your number who went on hunger strike, and how is she? Because I think she was taken to hospital, if I'm not mistaken. But perhaps you could maybe start with that. I mean, how is she? Is she okay? What's happening on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Chris. So two of them are on hunger strike, Emma Smart and Ben Booth. She is on the hospital wing. The reports are she's doing well. Phone calls, email contact. Yeah, she's as healthy as she can be, right? It's after a couple of weeks, it takes a toll on your body. There's no way around it. She's doing it in solidarity with all those people. Over 7 million more. It's going to be more this year, isn't it? Like Sue said, we know this because of the way they've handled COVID. So she's doing it in solidarity with all those people making a choice between heat and reason. So her and Ben just being steadfast. And yeah, can't.
And how long have they? How long? What was the jail term that they got?
There's a variety. So two protesters got 3 months. All the others got 4 months, apart from Ben Taylor, because he told the judge that he would continue the campaign, and I think he said a naughty word in courtroom. I think that's really why they gave him an extra 2 months. So our Steve, the cells are warm, darling. You will at least be warm in there, and the food's not too bad. Yeah, you're looking at about 4 months, aren't you? We think. But our courts are being very, very inconsistent at the moment. You know. That, like I said, this whole injunction business is a way of avoiding juries and not letting us, you know, not giving us our right to be judged by a jury of our peers. So we'll see.
Yeah. Steve, you're in court, aren't you? It's the High Court, isn't it? In London, I believe. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, Chris.
Just tell us when are you in court? What's the date of the hearing?
Tuesday the 13th or 14th. Right. 13th. Yeah, 13th.
Right.
We haven't got a time yet, but I'm assuming it'll be around about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right. And how many are up in the court on that day, Steve?
There's 9 of us, but one has already been charged from a previous time when he's in custody. He's one of the hunger strikers, but he's the 9th that will be up in court, which will make a total of us then 9, but 17 altogether.
Are you being represented in court? Have you got solicitors?
Yes,
or what?
yes, I've
Yeah.
got a barrister.
Right.
It's debate, but I might, as a number of us have in the past, represent ourselves. I'm just deciding what to do on that. But there is a barristers involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very best of luck.
For civil, non-violent direct action.
No, indeed. I mean, the very best of luck. And look, I mean, there's there's a honourable tradition of direct action in this country. I mentioned the suffragettes and so on, and but there are others, anti-arms campaigners and so on who've actually won cases in court because they've argued that they are taking action. Yes, they broke the law, but they're breaking the law to prevent an even bigger breach, as it were, an even bigger attack, if you like, on people. And clearly what you're doing in terms of highlighting the impact of fuel poverty, which we know is killing thousands, I mean tens of thousands, probably. It's well, we know certainly tens of thousands last year. And I think the World Health Organization, when they were looking at the excess winter deaths in Britain, there's a range of reasons why mortality rate in the winter is greater than in the summer. Icy roads and things like that. A proportion of it obviously down to living in cold homes. And what they were saying was that the number of people dying as a consequence of fuel poverty is actually, if anything, underestimated. So I think we can safely say we are looking at tens of thousands of people who are being affected. I'm seeing that Lizzie's joined us, which is good. And just before we bring Lizzie in and see what kind of audience reaction we've been getting. Thanks, Lizzie. I wasn't sure if you were available this evening. Just in terms of, I mean, one of those discussions that I think one of the questions that has been put, I'm not sure if it was to you, Tracey, or one of your colleagues, was about, well, how will you afford to pay for all this insulation, etc. Well, I think that's very easily answered, to be honest with you, because as I've already said, Britain is a very wealthy country, but we have the advantage of having our own sovereign currency. The Bank of England issues our currency, so we can never run out of money. Money is no object in this country. That's the point.
Yeah,
and I think we need to make that case loud and clear to anybody who kind of asks these questions, because they're coming at it from they're speaking in a sort of economic illiterate way. We came off the gold standard in this country many years ago. We were linked into something called the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is effectively the gold standard. But Richard Nixon abandoned that in 1971, and so it's been a floating fiat currency ever since. And I would recommend anybody who's interested in this topic, or indeed interested in how we improve our infrastructure, housing stock, and pay for public services, etc., to look up work by people like Bill Mitchell, who came and spoke at the Festival of Resistance, and Stephanie Kelton, who's written an excellent book called The Deficit Myth. I mean, and Stephanie and indeed Bill and others who advocate modern monetary theory, I mean, they make this point very, very clearly, and they set it out in very kind of logical steps, that the fiscal deficit really doesn't matter. The only issue, really, the only limitation on the government's ability to spend into the economy is the capacity of the economy to absorb that spending. Now, we're nowhere near in this country at full capacity. The economy, much idle capacity in the economy at the moment. We've got millions of workers who are either unemployed or underemployed in Britain. So we've got the available workforce. We know that there's a massive need, clearly, to insulate all of the homes in Britain. We know that we can afford to pay for that because we've got this spare capacity. We can issue the currency, so there's no issue. We didn't go into the euro, thank goodness, because that would have been problematic if we had. And so I think it's really, really crucial, and I would recommend anybody who's involved in Insulate Britain to sort of, look into modern monetary theory, because it's a good way, I think, to respond to these sorts of stupid questions which are put. And I mean, one of the points you were making, I think, Tracey, when Richard Madeley was making the point, was you quite rightly, I think, pointed out how we can afford to spend money on military and all the rest of it, and we could divert it. But I think for me, a better response is to point out our ability, our flexibility as a nation, with our own sovereign currency to invest, and that's what we should be doing. And so, but Lizzie, she wanted to come back there. You were going to say something, Tracey, before I bring in.
I do.
Lizzie, yeah, oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I had a grown-up response ready, but I got really angry at the frame of the question: where does the money come from, the police or the NHS? And I am so tired of them framing it at people like that, especially when I think everybody needs to learn a little bit about the economy, because it's going to blow your mind, right? It's a giant con. The emperor's got no clothes on, right? It's, yeah. So yeah, I
no,
did
absolutely.
have a really grown-up response, but
no,
I was
indeed.
just really angry.
we can have a good and a vibrant and a functioning National Health Service and a police service and all social care. We can do all of these things. And if we want, if the economy does start to overheat, and it's at full capacity, it's nowhere near that at the moment, but if it gets towards full capacity, well, then you can use the taxation system to tax out of the economy some of the spending, if you like, some of the capacity which is being absorbed by private corporations, to create the space for public spending on the things that are needed by the public. And we certainly need to, insulate homes in Britain, tackles fuel poverty, it creates jobs, and it has the benefit of reducing our carbon emissions into the atmosphere as well. But Lizzie, welcome, Lizzie. I'm glad you're here. I wasn't sure, as I say, you were free. I didn't know that you were going to be here.
Well, I think
so, go on, mate.
Last minute, wasn't it? It was all a bit last minute.
Right, okay.
So,
yeah.
So we've got a lot of questions tonight. One was, what support have you had from Labour? I answered that for you, none. But I wanted to know how if you've had any support from unions. Steve, have you had any support from unions?
You're muted at the moment, Steve.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, I'm trying. I'm working on it. Yeah. I've been obviously preoccupied during the campaign, and now I've got this court injunction trial on Tuesday.
Yeah, so you haven't been able to go to meetings.
Yeah, so I'm able to go to meetings.
You'd think that somebody from Unite would have been in touch with you and said, "Hey, Steve, saw you on the TV the other night. Hey, Tracey, saw you on Good Morning Britain. We'd love to support what you're doing. We think it's brilliant. It'd give all of our workers jobs. We really want to back you." You'd think, wouldn't you?
My door's always open and my phone's always on. That's all I'll say. Yeah. Sorry, Tracey. Yeah, you're going to say something.
Yeah, no, the same, and that's a great thing. But I'm not sure as the people at the front of this, we get to be the popular party that brings the changes in that's needed. What I'm hoping is happening is that Unite are seeing that actually maybe a little bit more resisting the government betraying us is needed, so that these other groups will find some courage and get a little bit more on board themselves. I can maybe understand them not wanting to tag themselves to Insulate Britain, but you need to up your game, unions. Come on.
If I could just jump in there very, very quickly, Lizzie. I mean, Unite. I mean, I was a member of the UCAT, which was the Union of Construction and Allied Trades and Technicians when I was in the building trade. but now UCAT merged with Unite. So Unite is basically looks after building workers, and there's a huge, as we've already said, number of jobs to be created in the construction industry, insulating everybody's home. And actually, I think we should be insulating commercial premises as well. I mean, it could create hundreds of thousands of jobs. Exactly. So Unite ought to be, very much banging that drum and banging your drum, as it were, and supporting your cause. Anyway, sorry, Lizzie, just wanted to make that.
No, well, that's a very good point, and it sort of got rid of the other point that I was going to make because I've forgotten it now.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. A lot of people saying that, Tracey, you stood up and you spoke and you made a video, and you had no political leanings beforehand. Like many of us, you know, we all go through life, don't we, trying to either scratch a living or to live our lives, and we don't really think about the political will behind it that has created such want and need and desperation amongst ordinary people. Do you live in an ordinary house? Have you got a family?
Yeah, I was one of them people who thought politics was a separate thing rather than realise everything is politics, right? That's where I'm at now. I'm disabled. I live in a housing association house. I'm on benefits. I have 3 children who are grown. Lots of people keep saying that social services should come along, but that just shows people make assumptions, right? My youngest is 20, 21 and 25, and actually my youngest is just moving out, so that's a little bit tricky at the moment. You know, I'm still a mum. We're just ordinary people, but yeah, I'm in a housing association.
You're seeing the same as everybody else. Well, myself anyway, and Steve, I know, and Chris. We all see it that our children, for a start, have got no job prospects. They've got the only prospect they've got is that they'll soon be joining the homeless people you see on the street. You know, every week when I can, when I go into town, I take £10. I don't have much, but I take £10 and I give £1 to every person I see. And it used to be that I would come home with that £10 because there was no one to see. But now that £10 goes nowhere. And this is a very small market town. I live not far from.
Is that homeless people?
Yeah.
Is that homeless people you're talking about? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, absolutely. You never used to see homeless people on the street. You're absolutely right, as you know.
No, and on my Facebook chats, you know, the local chats that I'm sure everybody has, I have them, of local communities. My village chat, we've got, we have a post every week of someone saying, oh my God, we're being made homeless next week. We got a family, 3 children. We both work all the time. We work as many hours as we can, and we still can't afford to live here. So, you know, how do we deal with that? And I've always thought that Insulate Britain was getting to the roots of that. You know, if we created properly built homes and housing for people, then we could keep them in those homes. And we could also, if we insulated commercial buildings, that was my point for your commercial context, Chris, was that if we insulate commercial buildings, and what about refurbing those commercial buildings that are of no use anymore because everybody's working from home and people are moving out of their offices. So why don't we repurpose all those commercial buildings and create decent homes and we can do it, like you said, with modern monetary theory. You don't even have to look at MMT or take any lessons in the subject to know that actually there is a complete lack of political will to do this, because with the coronavirus, with the lockdown, it was soon made illegal for anybody to be on the street. So all the local councils managed to house everybody, didn't they? So there was the political, but there was the ability to do this, just no political will to do it.
Heartbreaking watching them undo that decision, wasn't it?
This is the easiest part of to cure homelessness. The easy part is the housing. Believe me, I've been in this sector for 4 or 5 years. The hardest part will be the social care and the support side of it. I'm drifting a bit now from Insulate Britain, but if you insulate houses and you break down the social barriers or the unconscious bias of the council estate that it has got to in the last 20, 30 years.
Well, that was created anyway.
And incorporate them individuals as a prospect or
deserving member of the community.
Yes, and you can do that. There's ways of doing that by making them provide a service unknowingly and wittingly by their premises that they are a part of society. And there are ways of doing that within the insulation and retrofitting of these properties. Believe me, I'm not going to go into it now because it's a different subject.
But just in terms of council properties, Steve and/or Tracey, for that matter, we've only got a few minutes left now, so we need to be quick. Is there an issue, as far as you're aware, of fuel poverty in council accommodation as well as in the private sector as well?
Yes.
Now,
massive.
Is that what? Is that what? Because it's interesting because I mean, the new Labour government, which I mentioned in my opening remarks, they introduced the decent home standard for council dwellings, and I'm supposed to have brought all those council dwellings up to that good standard. But I don't think it's included the issue of insulation, or if it did, they certainly didn't do a very good job of it. The point I was going to make is that even if there isn't the political will to use the flexibilities available to central government, which, as I've said, has its own sovereign currency, it issues the currency, so it can never run out of money. Local authorities actually can do more than they're doing to deal with the housing crisis, because there is no cap now on the housing revenue accounts. There used to be a cap on how much they could borrow. But ironically, it's the Tory government. And when I was chair of housing and then deputy leader and leader of the council in Derby, and even when I was an MP, was campaigning for the cap on the housing revenue accounts to be lifted. And obviously, when I was an MP, it was a Tory government. But for most of the time when I was a councillor, it was a Labour government, and they refused to do it. Now the Tories have lifted that cap. So local authorities should be dealing with, they could eliminate the housing crisis almost at a stroke, but they could also be doing a lot more to ensure that they deal with the fuel poverty issue. It's appalling that you've got public housing, which is, doesn't meet those fuel poverty standards. But, sorry, Lizzie, did you want to come in there? Yeah, go on.
Well, they've given away all their housing portfolios, haven't they? Not only the government forced them to sell their housing portfolio to the tenants, which is one argument, but also they've let in all these private providers, housing associations, etc., who are for profit before people. So they're looking at their investors' money, and so they don't care. Some of course, some do care. Perhaps many do care. But there are plenty enough that don't care, and they don't care if Tracey's house is fit for purpose or costing her £30 a week or £50 a week to heat, to pay her fuel bill. They don't care. They just want their rent money. However they get that rent money, they don't want to lay out any money on insulating it. Thank you very much.
No, indeed. Listen, we've only got 2 minutes left. Perhaps just a final word from Steve, and then last word to you, Trace. Any closing comments, Steve, that you would like to make?
Thank you for letting us be on this platform, and thank you for enlightening us, or me myself. I've remembered. Obviously, we've met before, Chris, and every time I meet you, I learn something new, and it's always a pleasure.
Well, the feeling's mutual, comrade. So, thank you, mate. Appreciate that. Appreciate that, mate.
Thank you,
Tracey. Any final closing comments that you would like to make?
Yeah, thanks to all of you, and just to say, look, we're in a really complicated, really layered mess, but actually, at heart, it's something really simple. Do we want to continue believing in individual greed? Or are we going to get on with community need and understanding that by looking after the weakest link, actually, it's not about being a bleeding heart, it's about being logical. Right? We need to come together and protect each other. So thanks for having us, and good luck, Steve.
Thanks very much. Yes, very best of luck, Steve, to you in the High Court hearing, and thank you both, and thank everybody that's involved with the Insulate Britain. Frankly, you are an inspiration, and look, in years to come, historians will look back at this period, and you will be held up like the suffragettes were all those years ago, as people who were ahead of the curve, and you'll probably putting statues up to you two comrades for the efforts that you are engaged in. Well, I'd like to see that. I know you're very modest, Steve, but I'd like to see that in the fullness of time. Listen, the British establishment put up statues to slave owners, didn't they? So if anybody deserves a statue, it's people like you who are trying to deal with this appalling crisis that we have in terms of people dying because they can't afford to heat their homes properly. It's an absolute outrage. It's not justified in any way, shape, or form. We're a wealthy country. There's no need for it. It's lack of political will. And obviously what you're doing in terms of raising the potential climate disaster, the catastrophe which will befall us if we don't get a grip of this. And so I say more power to your elbow. Thank you for everything that you're doing. You're an inspiration. Keep going, and we're behind you. Thank you, everybody, for watching this evening. I hope you've enjoyed this evening's discussion. And if you want to follow up and you're interested in supporting Insulate Britain, I would urge you to look them up and to lend them your support. Thanks for watching this evening. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Good night.